Communication 705.
Communication 705 requests discussion regarding the formation of a budget review ad hoc committee to review, research, and address concerns relevant to the County of Hawaii budget for fiscal year 2018-2019 from Councilmember Herbert M. Tim Richards III, dated January 10, 2018. This is postponed on February 6, and there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Richards, seconded by Ms. Leloy to close file on this communication.
So we don't need a motion now, it's just back on the table?
There's a pending motion
Okay.
already.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And yeah, we, how do I approach this? First of all, I do have a PowerPoint that I put together to use as a discussion point, and if I'd like to ask for personal privilege, is that a possibility, Chair?
How long would that take?
About 5 minutes.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, if that is not on the agenda, how do we proceed? Or can we make
Sure.
copies of it?
We can make copies of it.
And then it will be assigned a point number? How do you suggest? We could probably move on if it'll take us some time to
Yeah,
do that.
eventually, I'm sorry, pardon me, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but eventually
No.
it would need to be made part of the record.
Right.
It could be utilized now, but it doesn't seem like we're quite ready to do that.
Okay.
So your call at this point.
Given the fact that we would have to have it as public record, would you be able to just discuss your
Sure.
verbally?
Sure, I'll discuss from my numbers and then
Thank you.
go forward. So I think, first of all, I'd like to, again, echo my thanks to Mr. Birch for coming forth with the numbers. And my intent of having this discussion is to put on the table to talk about our impending budget concerns and put it in context with all the rest of the tax implications and ramifications of the decisions we have made and will be making coming forward. One of my concerns, and you've heard me discuss this in the past, is that we get into a maelstrom of silo legislation, where what I mean by that is we look at one issue and don't put it in context with the rest. If we look at our budget for last year, we're looking at $491 million. Projections for next year are going to be well over $500 million. If we look at where those funds come from, 60% come from our real property tax. And echoing some of the concerns that our finance director has said numerous times previously, our funding sources are very limited as to the diversity of it. And so much of our income stream is tied to real property tax. If we look at the other sources of revenue, I mean, they're stretched across a bunch of different things. We do have fuel tax, licensing, grants, et cetera, but again, the primary concern or primary funding source is that real property tax to the tune of almost $300 million. Okay. One of the justifications that we have had used on us is that since we have such relatively low real property tax, that's a good reason to raise it. But when I look at that, I don't see that as a great justification, because if we look at our real property, or excuse me, our total tax burden, we are running some of the highest in the nation if you take into account real property as well as income tax and excise tax, et cetera. So we actually have one of the highest tax burdens in the nation. So using that as a justification, I don't see that as a good way to handle it. We still have to pay attention to the cost of doing our county business. And we've talked about the other taxes. Again, I mentioned the real property tax. I've heard it loud and clear from my constituency, enough taxes. If we look at our fuel tax, we took a substantial jump in that last year from 8.8 cents up to 15 cents. And though it was long in the making at that point, and this goes back to our conversations last year with the budget, we approved our budget. We had a balanced budget, yet we went ahead and increased the fuel tax. And that concerned me because for each penny increase in the fuel tax, we glean about $1 million. And so we went from 8.8 cents up to 15 cents. We have that increase in revenue, and I'm not saying that it couldn't be used. What I'm talking about is, again, the total tax burden. Now we are looking at the general excise tax, and that is a part of our heavy tax burden, and this 0.5% increase coming forward. we'll talk about this a little bit more, but my point is, if we don't look at all the tax revenues that we are going to glean and stack it up against what we're going to spend, we're going to make some mistakes. And I think we can avoid making some of these mistakes if we have the ability to sit down and talk story and brainstorm, have that ability to get that kicking around. I know one of the questions that the chair raised in the past, is this allowable? Well, Maui has been doing this for quite some time now, and I think if there was an issue that would have been coming forth, that would have already been raised. The intent is to save our county some money and become more efficient. We've had a great presentation about our visitor industry expanding substantially. When looking at the general excise tax and this surcharge that we may or may not decide to assign, that 0.5% relative to our GDP, which is numbers coming from finance, set at about $5 billion. That's where the number of $25 million comes from. If we believe Mr. Birch's numbers, which I do, that half of that $5 billion comes actually from the tourism industry. May I have a few more minutes?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. That would mean that only half of our GDP is actually from industry ongoing on the island. I find that a little hard to believe, but I will accept that for the time being. My point again comes back to the fact that in order to have these conversations about the best way to go with our budget, we need to be able to talk about all of this stuff in context and the impact of each of the taxes that we may or may not assess and adjust coming forward. I do not believe the correct way to figure out how to run the county is figure out how much we want to spend and then adjust our income stream. I believe we have a fair income stream and we adjust our expenses back to that income stream. But we won't have a good idea on that income stream unless we have the ability to have the conversation about this. So again, my reasoning for the ad hoc committee is to take a selection of 4, and I propose this, so I'm very willing to serve on the committee. I'm very willing to chair the committee. But if the will of the group is to have a random selection, I'm very fine with that too, whatever the group wants to do. But the point is to have the conversations, and the concept I have is that 4 of us sit down and we each take a couple departments and dig into those departments, have a very clear financial understanding of those departments. So when we get the budget from the mayor, we have a very, very clear understanding of that. So when we sit down reporting back to Finance Committee, we have our quote-unquote expert of each of those departments, and we can report back to our group so we can make a collective decision based upon good information, and with that good information, we will get good decisions. So with that, I want to hear a discussion on this. I want to have the conversation and not just a decision, vote up or vote down, because we're charged with the fiduciary responsibility of taking care of this county, and we have to pay attention to the finances, the good and the bad side, and that's what I think we're trying to do. So at this point, I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Ms. Poindexter?
You know, for me, I still believe that we can individually speak with departments and bring that forward. The bottom line for me is that we need to have public participation and open government. That's why we have the Sunshine Law. And we don't want to take any more away from the public and have the perception that we're trying to do things behind closed doors. I've said that publicly about the state legislature when we had difficulties as not having public input. So I see the danger with that. You know, we can brainstorm in public, even if it takes us hours and we run to midnight every night or whatever it is. But, you know, we just took a pay increase too, so we should be willing to work those long hours. The public is paying us to do that. So at this time, unfortunately, I'm not able to support this yield at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Poindexter. Mr. Richards?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Council Chair, I hear your concern about transparency. my pushback on that is, sure, we can do that. And of course, we can have the private meetings, but we can't have the private meetings and brainstorm as we go forward. And I think the collective wisdom is very important there. Case in point, we tabled this motion because we'd had such a long day and we deferred it. And that's my concern going forward. If we can do that just to have the conversation on this, my concern is going forward. I think we can do a far better job managing that. And we've used ad hoc in the past. The ad hoc committee we used for the styrofoam reduction bill worked phenomenally well because we were able to sit down and talk story about that. If we can do that, we will avoid it. And I hear what you're saying because we're not going to be making any decisions. The point is that we get that information, get that research done, and figure out that information that we need to make the good decisions. So though I hear your concern, I respectfully disagree with it because I think we can actually do a better job for the county and communicate all that. I yield.
Because he got a chance to respond to what I said.
Okay, I'll allow it just this one
Okay,
time, Ms.
so
Poindexter. I'm going to the rest of the
I just want to
council
stop the
members.
back and forth on each one, but again, I thank you for saying we can respectfully disagree because at this point, again, the public has a right to be involved with something that, we're going to empty their pockets on. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Poindexter. Ms. Ruggles?
At first glance, I thought this was a really great idea, and I really appreciate your intent with doing this. My question is, what would be the difference with this ad hoc and the process that we go through during the budget season?
I think the difference is the process that we go through is in order for us to have a committee meeting for finance or for any of the committees for that matter, we must agendize, we must have a public publicizing the meeting and going forward. And one of the concerns that I've heard is we can have the private meetings. Yes, we can have the private meetings. What we can't do is have a communal meeting to hear and discuss because, as we all know, each person hears things a little bit differently. And now, if we're willing to sit through numerous budget meetings and have one scheduled 2 or 3 times a week, I'm willing to do that as far as that goes for the finance committee as a whole. What I don't want to do is get us backed into a corner like last budget cycle, and I think we can avoid that. Now, I understand the concern for transparency, believe me. That's not the intent of this at all. The intent is to, and let's just pick up a department, since Public Works is here. One of us decides to become the person for Public Works. We sit with the group, we talk stories, so we have a clear understanding of the needs of that group, and then we can deliver it better to our council as a whole because we'll have that intimate understanding of their needs. Police is another one, fire is another one. If we embrace a portion of the budget rather than try and ramrod it all the way through. And my idea there is with that understanding, we'll have a better grasp of what we truly need and thereby what our budget would be, and thereby we can make good decisions concerning our revenue side, which is going to come from the taxes. I think we have a whole bunch of other conversation to have concerning taxes, as has been pointed out by Mr. Birch, and our visitor side and what we might be able to do there. But I think that could be part of the conversations as well. So the idea is not to hide anything, by no means. It's be able to brainstorm, and when we bring that back to the the committee, the finance committee, we have that discussion in front of everybody. But it'll be far more efficient because we have the Cost of Government Commission reviewing things. I think they'll be far more efficient and save us time. We spend, depending whose calculations you say, somewhere around $10,000 an hour for us to be sitting in council. If we can reduce that number because we're being more efficient with our time and the conversations, I think that would be doing what we're supposed to do, which is taking care of the county for the constituents. Does that answer the question, Councilwoman?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. If I'm understanding, during last budget season, because we had the budget deadlines, the sort of sentiment is that we were pushed in a corner, and so we had to make decisions during these really long meetings where we were all pretty exhausted from meeting for 8 hours straight. So, and so it's also for efficiency and to save the county time in the public arena, which is the tune of $10,000 an hour. Am I missing anything?
No, it's striving for efficiency and getting better decisions made in a better context.
Okay, thank you for this time.
Thank you, Ms. Ruggles. Council members?
I am not comfortable with this, and for the following reasons. While it was described that we had some marathon meetings during the budget process, there's always marathon meetings during every budget process. For those who've been on the council longer, they're well aware of that. I wasn't a novice to the county budgeting process. I did work as a civil servant, and when I did, I had to do a budget for my section. I participated in the department budget development. And I served on the Cost of Government Commission in 2010-11, where we analyze the county's budget. And now I'm in a position to approve the county's budget. And last year, you basically have a committee at your disposal. It's your legislative assistant and yourself to put together what can be a very difficult process, but you get to put together your amendments, and that's based on the public hearings that we have with our department heads. And my concern here is us trying to maneuver through operations without direct knowledge of the operations. This is something that's kind of a separation of powers, and the reason that we do the budget process the way we do. It starts at the lowest level of every department, moves up through that department, vetted by the directors of those departments in concert with the finance department, then to the mayor, more vetting. And these are the people that run day-to-day operations. We are the policy-making branch, not the operations branch. And I'm just a little uncomfortable with taking this behind closed doors and appointing a committee of 4 for the very reason that it needs to be public. I have a differing viewpoint, perhaps, than Mr. Richards, and probably from everyone on the council. We all have different viewpoints of how the budget should be developed, where the money is best spent, where the cuts are best made. I don't want this railroaded by a committee that I might not be in agreement with. I would want to sit on it, but we would all want to sit on it, and we are sitting on it. It's called the County Council, and we do this in concert, in public. And yes, I hate the fact that it costs money, but we could cut that by doing our homework. I recall last year, we were facing property tax changes, real property tax changes. And I asked for information from finance that, I don't know, maybe no other council had asked for before. I asked for the tables and how that was calculated, because I wasn't real comfortable with the initial proposal from the mayor to do across the board 6.5% change to all property tax classes. So we had a spreadsheet to play around with. And when we got that, we asked that everybody submit that to Laserfish at the soonest possible date so that we could review each other's work. I did that. I was the only one. 10 days later, we came to council, and there were all of these last-minute amendments laid before us, floor amendments, which were really, really difficult to absorb in the context of a long meeting without having looked at them previously. So I think we should go back to the commitment that I thought we made last year, which is to do our homework well in advance so that we have any amendments before each other through our internal process, and let us be able to work it through that way. And I agree with Ms. Poindexter, if you need additional meetings with departments to fully understand why they are requesting money here and not there, they're available to us. They will meet with us. They will take the time to meet with us. So I am not at this point going to be supporting this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. O'Hara. Anyone else? Ms. Leloy and then Ms. Yoff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And, I like the idea, of being able to drill down with each department, and almost like Ms. O'Hara said, leaving the operation stuff to them, but looking at other ways between each department that maybe we could create synergies between, so we could be more efficient, more effective, trim the budget a little bit. I actually didn't view this ad hoc committee as something that would happen behind closed doors. And I was drawn to our charter, section 3-16, which is a mandatory program review. And I actually saw this as kind of a hybrid of what's afforded to us in the charter, that at least every 4 years, the council shall critically review every program supported wholly or partially by county funds. That's actually, I guess, my optics on what this ad hoc committee would gravitate to, and what the goals and objectives of it would actually be this critical program review. Because it also, under the charter, basically says if that program is not sustainable, we can offer modification levels, or we can actually suggest that the program get terminated. But what's happening now is we get a proposed budget from the administration, and they're picking and choosing which programs get terminated. And then we as a body have to sit down and listen to our constituents and then push back. And I kind of appreciate everybody's, using good information, helps us make good decisions. But now, we all know better, so we should be doing better. I like to support this in that vein, that we're actually accomplishing something provided to us under the charter, which is a mandatory program review. Again, it was never my intention that this would be done behind closed doors. It would be a more transparent process, and even an opportunity for the business community or other people to weigh in on how effective these departments are, or these various programs that we have on the book, and if they're actually serving its purpose. Those are my thoughts. I don't know if Mr. Richards maybe wants to reframe the goals and objectives, and point to that section of our charter as a tool. I'm not sure. Those are my thoughts. I think we have the authority. It's given to us under the charter.
What section?
The section is 3-16. Mandatory program reviews. So, I don't know if any other body or council member has ever done those. And so I actually saw this subcommittee as that hybrid to move into that arena. But I got real familiar with this county charter because of the salary commission. So there's a few other things in here we should be doing. But that's what we were elected to do. Again, I don't know how many more times I have to say it, I never viewed this as an opportunity to be behind closed doors. I saw it as a hybrid of program review. I yield at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Ms. Yara. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr.